difference in fucking presentation when they start fucking eating. Oh dear. Right, so this video, I've been interested in this phenomena for many years of gang stalking and targeted individuals, and I think it's a real phenomena. I genuinely think it's a real phenomena, and I'll explain a bit why in this video, but also some of the reasons I think, like what's possibly behind it. And I dare say I'm wrong, but it's just amusing, really. Now, a lot of people, they've kind of got this idea, whether they describe themselves as being targeted individuals or the victims of gang stalking or harassment. They've kind of got this idea that not the government or some kind of organisation is behind it, and I immediately discount that. I mean, I've read a lot of stuff like Operation Mind Control by Walter Bowart and people like this, and I know of voice-to-skull technology and all these things. And I dare say there are these, you know, with MK Ultra, there's all these manipulations that go on. But I worked in a psychiatric ward for like nigh on, well, as a nurse for 27 years, I think it was in the end, and I can tell you simply by, you use a process of just like deduction, and I tell you that like the general level of like an average member of staff in one of those units in a mental health hospital in England is just, I mean, people can't do basic shit. They literally can't do basic shit like the nurses or the support workers. You've got to explain stuff a million times. Everyone forgets everything. So the idea, the places are hardly staffed most of the time. You're desperate to get members of staff. So the idea that there's like, there's like banks and banks of workers who are like doing stuff to control people, and I just find it, I think if anyone really thought about it, you'd see that this is just not what's happening. That there's, somebody's on the end of a computer spying on somebody, whispering into their ear, making them hear voices. It's just not happening, man, in my opinion. But like, I do believe it's a very real phenomenon, and it's definitely prevalent in the modern world. Now, there could be various reasons for it, but one of them that crossed my mind recently, there's this idea of Carlos Castaneda. Oh, sorry, I'm actually getting a bit forward on myself. I've been watching a few channels, like Scott Snitzer's one of them. I think he's got a good channel, but some other people as well, and they have this idea that maybe there's a lot of other people as well, that there's a spiritual dimension to this gang stalking thing. Some people are like, they're heavy Christians or whatever, and they think it's some kind of satanic attack or something. And but there's this spiritual dimension to it, and this is something that never really occurred to me. But I was thinking along the same lines that it's just that there's something wrong in the modern world, and that there's something wrong with, like when you go out into society, that there's just there's a kind of disconnect between you and other people, and other people seem to be able to pick up on it. It's almost like something like Revenge of the Body Snatchers type scenario, or We've Got One That Can See type scenario. I had this experience many times in London, and yeah, with Carlos Castaneda, whatever you think of like those books, whether they're just made up bullshit or not, there's this idea of the mud shadows, which is, or like a glamour, like a mud shadow, this kind of being, like a parasitic kind of spiritual being that attaches itself to you, and more or less is there throughout your whole life, feeding off, like vampiric kind of entity, feeding off your negative energy. And I was thinking about this recently, because watching videos about this idea that there's a spiritual element to the gang stalking thing, and like what could be controlling individual groups of people to kind of apparently harass and go after other people. And it made me think of Kenneth Grant in some of his books. I think it was in Aleister Crowley and the Hidden God, but it could have been another one. Maybe it was Cults of the Shadow. He was talking about this idea of like a glamour. I think he describes it as a glamour, and that this idea of you have like a generative force, like you have in your body, you have this kind of spiritual and physical generative force, and that when you masturbate, I believe somebody else wrote about this as well, but I'm not sure exactly who it was. That when someone like masturbates, that like that energy is basically what that semen, what that's meant for, and that vital force is meant for creating life. Now, when someone like knocks one out, that's that life, that force that goes to create life, it still creates something, and it can create something called a glamour, which is basically like a kind of like a weird spirit that can like hang around you or inhabit the location that you live in, or just, I don't know, let loose or whatever, but it creates something. It creates this kind of spiritual force that isn't a good thing. And it occurred to me, well, okay, we're living in the age of computers, and obviously these are basically like glorified masturbating machines for a lot of people. And there's probably more... Oh, dog's coming. No, you're not having it. It's for the cats. Right, you get up here and eat it there. Eat it there. There you go. Right. So yeah, so there's probably, I dare say, more people knocking one out in this day and age than there ever was at any other time. And I thought to myself, well, maybe if you've got these like an infestation, as you like, of these glamours or mud shadows, maybe they're like actually more or less taking over a large section of society. And this explains this rise in this phenomena of people feeling that they're targeted, or maybe genuinely being targeted, or gang stalked. But like I say at the beginning, I don't believe it's like a deliberate thing that's been done by some organisation. Now, for example, if that was the case, there's I was talking to some people who are into the occult a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, and I'm aware of some other ideas that have been written about in the past. Now, there's this idea that when you try and embark on like a kind of, I don't know, whatever, a spiritual quest, or you're aware that there's something wrong in the world and you're trying to better yourself. I've observed that, like, when you try and do that to whatever extent, whatever degree, that things actually become worse. Things get worse for you. And I was asking these people about this, and they said, yeah, it's true. This girl I was talking to, I said, have you found that when you actually try and go on a more spiritual path, things get really bad? She was like, yeah, it happens all the time. It's quite common. And there's this, I believe there's a phrase, it's something along the lines of, the higher you try and stand with your heads in the heavens, the lower you must sink to the hells. No, you can't have that. That's for the cats. You've had all them bones. Now you've had your fill, right? Don't sit there looking at it. That's not for you, right? So there's this idea that the more you try and aspire spiritually, or the more maybe you notice that there's something wrong in the world, and you start noticing it, and you start thinking, this ain't right. I don't understand what's going on, and it starts to affect you. That these things they'll attack you, because they feed off like people's distress, and they feed off kind of negative energy. Now, I was wondering if there was something to this, with this idea of the mud shadows, that this is what's going on for people, that people are actually, there's like an infestation of these mud shadows, and when there is somebody who's kind of maybe a bit different from normal, that these mud shadows will affect a large group of people that they're attached to in order to go and attack this person. I don't know, it's just an idea. Now, this idea, like I said at the beginning, of gangstalking, I think it's a real phenomenon. I had experiences in London that were so strange. Like, I never believed I was being targeted or gangstalked, but I had this very real phenomenon. Every time I would go out to the shop, there would be a simple procedure, like, all I had to do was like leave my flat, walk 5 minutes down the road, go to the post office, post a parcel, go to Tesco's for 10 minutes to pick up a couple of bits and pieces of food, and come back. And I would go out and come back, and it would literally like be, I would have had 4 or 5 like weird confrontations in that time, in just what should have been a simple 10-15 minute journey, and it happened all the time. And I couldn't work out what the hell was going on, and sometimes I'd be walking out the street and people would be looking at me like I had 2 heads or something, and I would just be like, what is going on today? What? And also this phenomena of, I'd go out and there'd be like one particular person, and I would keep bumping into them at different shops, and I would work out, well, there's no way that this person was targeting me, because they were in a shop and I went in it again, and they were there again. This person that had been stood in front of me in the post office, turning around, looking at me in the face, and then turning back around and tutting and mumbling to themselves. They were in a shop that I went into like sort of 10 minutes later, and I'm like, well, they couldn't have arranged that. So, but these experiences, I used to have them all the time. Sometimes I thought I was just like, I'd be like, I can't believe this is going on. And I would do things like, I would think, okay, I'm going to go out to the shops today, and I know what's going to happen. It was going to be a really bad experience. So I'd think what I could do, I could go out now, right now, and see what happens. Or I could wait 15 minutes or 20 minutes, have a cup of tea and then go out. Whichever option I choose, I know something weird's going to happen. And it always would happen. So it wasn't like there was, somebody had timed where they were going to be or something. But it was almost like it's a form of spiritual attack. I would come out of my flat 6:30 in the morning. The lift would be on my floor. I'd go to press the button on the lift, and it would immediately go up to the 20th floor. Then it would go down to the 18th floor. Then it would go down to the 16th floor. Then it would go down to the 12th floor. Then it would be stuck on the 10th floor for like 2 minutes. Then it would come down to my floor, and there'd be no one in it. And things like this all the time. So, I mean, I could go on and on and on, like my bike journey into work, on the way to work of a morning. I would always get blocks at the same place. Whenever I had to go for a gap, there would always be someone there. But there would be no one for another mile. But then I had to go through another little bit where I've got to go through like a park or something. At the gate, suddenly there's someone there, then there'd be no one. So when you have this experience, you think, fucking hell, I'm being targeted, these people are out to get me. But I think it's just something like other people are being affected by this negative spiritual force, which I believe could be possibly connected to this idea of mud shadows or glamours or kind of vampiric entities that are increasing in amount in amount in this dimension, on this planet. So that's all I wanted to say about that, really. I just thought I want to do a longer video on this, but when I get back home to England, I'm going to dig out my Kenneth Grant books and have a read through of them and try, and maybe I'll go through the whole 10, because I believe he wrote on this quite a bit. But his books, it's quite difficult to to fish stuff out of them, because they're so condensed and they're so difficult to read, in my opinion, anyway. But yeah, I think it's an interesting concept. And it goes a long way to explaining how this phenomena occurs, in my opinion. Anyway, I hope that's of interest to someone, and I hope you enjoy the cats and dogs. Okay.